This video is a follow-up to Let's Draw number 2, where I announced the winner of my best comment contest. The winner of the comment contest was Mr. Antinatalistperson. He was able to choose any philosopher he wanted and now would draw them, but Mr. Antinatalistperson surprised me by asking me to draw Mr. Antinatalistperson. But not only that, I knew that he and I are both fans of Inmendham, and I thought that's who we might pick, but he actually wanted Inmendham punching Mr. Antinatalistperson. He left the rest up to me, so enjoy this drawing of Inmendham socking Mr. Antinatalistperson in the face. So for this one, I'm going to take you through my entire drawing process, starting from the very beginning. First, I start out with these rough thumbnail sketches. I'm just trying to figure out composition, anatomy, and action. Also, before I even put pencil on paper, I have to do some research. This entails me looking through comic books in my collection to see what other artists have done, and I also have to do some screen grabs of Inmendham and Mr. Antinatalistperson for reference. So thumbnails are just also called gesture drawings. Just trying to get what's out of my head onto paper and just seeing, okay, if this is really going to work within the space I wanted. I was also looking at horizontal pieces, so maybe he was getting punched and you see the long arm kind of reaching over to him. But most of the punches in comic books are kind of this style, because you want him to kind of be coming out of the paper at you three-dimensionally. So after I get the idea down, and you can see these thumbnails are basically just poses. They're just slightly different versions of each other, just kind of refining, seeing if there's anything more I can get out of it. So after I got the nice gesture drawings down, and you can kind of see I was happy with one of them, I take a few reference photos of myself with my webcam just to make sure my anatomy is correct. Whenever you have like a fist coming at you, that can be kind of tricky to show where the forearm is. Mr. Antinatalistperson did not tell me why Inmendham is knocking his lights out. I think he just thought it would be funny. So I kind of saw it as a teacher-student kind of image. So that's kind of how I see Inmendham, just as a teacher. I mean, he's taught me so much just about how to use logic that I think, Mr. Antinatalistperson being so young would probably see it a similar way. So this is kind of a physical expression of some of Inmendham's famous verbal beatdowns. I think most of us, even his admirers, have been through this. He once called me a quote-unquote fucking idiot for a comment I made on one of his videos a couple of years ago. It was over one of the more minor animal rights issues where we slightly disagree, but I was saving that, that for a video in the future because I think it's worth discussing. I first discovered Inmendham about 5 years ago. That was about the same time I discovered the word antinatalism, and I honestly can't recall where I first heard it. It might have been on Amazon.com where I was researching anti-procreation books to read. I wasn't sure what words my search should contain. The word child-free wasn't really what I was after. So I wasn't sure what I was looking for until I stumbled upon Jim Crawford's Confessions of an Antinatalist. This was kind of the beginning for me. Getting into proper antinatalist philosophy in the antinatalist community. And so while I was reading his book, I looked him up on YouTube, where his screen name is Metamorph. And I watched a few of his videos, and this guy with kinky blonde hair kept popping up in the side suggestions. And one of them was a review of Crawford's book, and basically the rest is history. Once I started watching his videos, I couldn't stop. I remember I was doing some work out in the garage and I took my laptop out there with me. And I was listening to a video where he was walking through the woods explaining the entire history of life on Earth, just out of his head without any notes of any kind. And that's when I realized that here was a significant mind and a fully fleshed out philosophy based entirely on objective science. I mean, this is exactly what I was looking for. It's like there's so many YouTubers, philosophers, psychologists that you'll watch, and you're just waiting for the shoe to drop. Like, okay, where's the part where you find out he's a theist or he's full of shit in some way? And that just never happened with Inmendham. Like, I couldn't believe someone was actually using logic properly in every single video. It was such a revelation. I've listened to some of Inmendham's videos over and over again. It did take me a little while longer, though, before I became an ethicist. I have to credit Old Fan from Forever Wolf Films for that. We talked about it a little bit. We talked a little bit about our beliefs, veganism, atheism, etc., and finally, extinction came up. So although I was already a vegan, atheist, and Antinatalist, I was not an extinctionist for all life on Earth until I had that conversation with Old Fan, and she explained Inmendham's philosophy comprehensively to me. Because coming into Inmendham videos, you might be a little bit lost because there's not a lot of primer videos. Like, I see that he's doing that on his science channel, where it's like, okay, here's where you start if you want to get into this, because these are big subjects. And of course, Forever Films made the Ephelis, the movie, which is probably the best primer you're going to get on the philosophy. So she was a good person to explain that to me. And after that, I did consider myself an Ephelist. I read Benatar's book around this time also, and I realized that Ephelism was a more comprehensive philosophy than Benatar's antinatalism, which only calls for extinction of the human race. But much more than that, Inmendham has just made me better at thinking. I've never heard anyone use logic as brilliantly as he does. So I know his opinion on any subject is going to be facts-driven, and that's exactly what I want. But besides that, he has a charismatic style, including humor, and of course his verbal beatdowns are pretty famous and popular. He doesn't waste the viewer's time in his videos. He gets to the point and he stays on the point. I've watched every single video he's put out since 2013, not including all of his physics videos, as well as several hundred of his old videos. I just started from video 1 and went through them. He has a rare quality that Carl Sagan had, where he can make complex philosophical and scientific theories simple to understand. That probably is the greatest thing about the Inmendham channel. He never bogs the user down with jargon or big words to make himself sound intelligent. Even a child should be able to watch an Inmendham video and understand it. So the main thing he converted me to was an extinctionist, but his thoughts, on every subject has probably altered my thinking in some way. He recently made a few videos about Jordan Peterson, and oh my god, they're so good! I highly recommend watching them. I've watched them multiple times already, and especially the one on animal rights. I downloaded it as MP3, and I'm going to be listening to that in my car for a long time to come, I'm sure. I don't think he minds if people use his arguments, because I certainly am going to. They're just too good not to use, and that's why he's putting them out there. Some of his response videos to Hoflade are such masterpieces of argument that I've listened to them probably 10 times a piece. He has given me some of my best animal rights and antinatalist arguments that I use regularly. And they do work on people. They really do. I've seen it happen. So moving on to the drawing, now I'm getting past the rough stage. You can see I took my thumbnail, I scanned it in, and then I printed it out on 11 by 8.5, just regular copy paper in blue. So then I can draw over it in pencil and scan it in, and then I can just take the blue out. And then I can blow the pencil drawing up, print that out on 11 by 17, and do my inking on the light box. Even though I do need to use up my old India ink, I wanted to respect Mr. Antinatalistperson's veganism and only use animal-free art supplies for this image. I've upgraded from a number 2 to number 3 brush. That was probably the biggest change I've made in my art supplies. I found out that the number 3 is actually the most common brush for comic book artists to use. It's just a slightly bigger brush, but the great thing about it is that it holds more ink, so I don't have to keep dipping it in as often. I am using some technical pens for the small details like the eyes, and of course the any lines, any straight lines. I thought about using watercolor for this image, but because of the comic book nature of the drawing, I thought I'd just go with Photoshop as usual. I have a more fitting and proper portrait of Inmendham in my sketchbook that I plan to fully render out in the future. But this one was obviously a joke. I couldn't think of another 4-letter word to put on another brass knuckle in his right hand. But as I was, just editing the video now, I was like, duh, crap. C-R-A-P, cannibalism, reproduction, addiction, and parasitism. Oh well. Once a drawing is done, I don't really like to go back to it, unless something is really wrong, so I'll just leave it as is and maybe incorporate that into the next one. It's funny, in his recent video that Inmendham reviewed not just Jordan Peterson's video about his book, 12 Rules for Living, but he also reviewed Ethan Van Sciver's artwork for it. I happen to be a big fan of Van Sciver's work. It's so detailed, and his anatomy is so fucking good. He's one of the few comic book masters to have an actual YouTube channel. Like any kind of, small niche profession like this, a lot of comic book artists, they don't really want to reveal their secrets, it's hard to get gigs for the best work, and they kind of hide that stuff. That's why I've always had to go to comic book shows and stuff to actually talk to these guys, or find obscure interview magazines. But yeah, he actually has a channel. He only started it like less than a year ago, and he just shows himself drawing actual comic book pages. I mean, I would have killed to have this kind of information 20 years ago. But sadly, he's one of these Trumper anti-SJW guys. He also belongs to the Brigham Young cult, so it's disappointing. But luckily he doesn't write the comics; he just draws them. It does usually suck to meet or discover too much about the people you admire or whose work you admire. I've had that experience many times at Comic-Cons, like meeting someone who I thought was an artistic genius, just to find out they're a fucking douchebag. Like Van Sciver is a Mormon, and so is another one of my favorite artists, Mike Allred, the creator of Madman. It's one thing to have this God belief because it's just childhood brainwashing, you can't understand how it happens. But to be a Mormon, a religion founded only 200 years ago by Joe Smith Jr., it says right in his Wikipedia article, he's a convicted liar and scam artist. Convicted in a court of law, tricking people. According to Wikipedia, he's arrested 42 times in his life. Before he finally got lynched. And this is their God, man. This is their prophet. Fuck. Yeah, so it looks like this SJW word is not going away. Van Sciver uses it on a daily basis. In a previous video, I said that this was just a new term for bleeding heart liberal, but it actually seems to be more correct to say it's another word for PC police. So they're against political correctness, I guess. That's what an SJW is someone who tries to enforce political correctness. But they just happen to be liberals most of the time. So I'm drawing a man in his 50s punching a man in his early 20s, which is quite a contrast. Mr. Antinatalistperson is so young that he still has very soft features. And it's actually quite a bit harder to draw a young person or a woman than an older man. Older men are kind of more fun to draw, really, because you can add all these interesting lines that give the face character. But for a young person or a woman, you have to have a really minimalist approach. Women especially. Every single line has to have a purpose, and it only takes one or two of them to make them look much older than you want them to be. I'm realizing now that I'm over 40, and growing old really sucks. Since I met my wife 11 years ago, I've had 4 surgeries. 4 surgeries! I never had a surgery before I met her. I mean, it's not any correlation to her, it's just the fact that I'm 40 now, and this is the time of life when things start to go wrong. I've gotten past the point where most people died in the past, even though my mind feels like it did in my 20s. I still have the same goals and same ambitions for the most part. I'm still drawing comics and stuff like I did 20 years ago. I just happen to know more now. You just start to see the patterns and you're like, oh, it's this shit again. But I can see why people start having midlife crises around this time. If I'm going to do something useful with my life, I need to get to it. I have to decide if I just want to be a wage slave for the rest of my days. Anyways, one thing that superhumandance has been mentioning a lot is what is best in life, and he seems to believe it's romantic love. And part of me does agree with that. I mean, I'm a romantic, and I find it extremely difficult not to be around women, or be around one woman in particular, my wife. But love is a two-edged sword. It can bring joy and pleasure and warmth and comfort, but at the same time, when it's ripped away, it can bring about the greatest emotional torment you can experience. Because I love my wife so much, when we fight and argue, it just hurts. It just hurts so bad. I mean, that's when I turn into Spock the most. I just it's a defense mechanism. I just turn into a stoic, rock person. I don't want any emotion to hurt me because it's so painful. So that's the thing. That is the problem when you talk about what's good in life, is that it's always just one side of pain. I really like the yin yang symbol, even though I'm not a Taoist or anything. Just because it reminds me that for every joy moment, there's a dark side. The pain that comes from deprivation, wanting, needing, regretting. And love is really just addiction. It's also a lot of hard work. So, Mr. Antinatalistperson, this video and drawing were just for you, so I hope you enjoyed them. He also has a great channel with a lot of art, humor, music, animation, so I recommend you guys check it out. Links will be down below in the description, along with a link to this finished piece. So bye for now, and remember that life sucks. Please don't make things that suck.
Try not to be so surprised. We'll all fall down just because that's life. We're reaching the end of our time, reaching the end of the sunshine. Try not to be so surprised. We'll all fall down just because that's life. All that you do is now gone. No one you know to lean back on.